Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to read chapter 9 and chapter 10 of Pollyanna. Yesterday, when we read chapter 8, it finished with Pollyanna's visit with Miss Snow. Today, chapter 9 is entitled, Which Tells of the Man. It rained the next time Pollyanna saw the man. She greeted him, however, with a bright smile. "It isn't so nice today, is it?" she called. "I'm glad it doesn't rain always." The man did not even grunt this time, nor turn his head. Pollyanna decided that he did not hear her. The next time, therefore, she spoke louder. The man was striding along, his hands behind his back and his eyes on the ground. "How do you do?" she chirped. "I'm so glad it isn't yesterday, aren't you?" The man stopped abruptly, and there was a scowl on his face. "See here, little girl, we might as well settle this things right now," he began. "I've got something besides the weather to think of. I don't know whether the sun shines or not." Pollyanna beamed joyously. "No, sir, I thought you didn't, and that's why I told you, so you would notice that the sun shines and all that. I knew you'd be glad it did if you only stopped to think of it." "Well, of all the—" said the man, and he started forward again. But after the second step, he stopped and turned back, still frowning. "Why don't you find someone your own age to talk to?" "I'd like to, sir, but there aren't any around here. I don't mind very much. I like old folks just as well, maybe better. Sometimes, being so used to the Ladies' Aid." "Ladies' Aid. Is that what you take me for?" The man's lips were threatening to smile, and Pollyanna laughed. "Oh, no, sir. You don't look a mite like a Ladies' Aider. Not but that you're just as good, of course," she added politely. "I'm sure you're much nicer than you look." "Well, of all the—" he said again, as he turned and strode on as before. The next time Pollyanna met the man, he looked straight into her eyes. His face looked really pleasant, Pollyanna thought. "Good afternoon," he greeted her stiffly. "Perhaps I'd better say right away that I know the sun is shining." "You don't have to tell me," nodded Pollyanna. "I knew you knew it just as soon as I saw you." "Oh, you did you?" "Yes, sir. I saw it in your eyes and in your smile." Grunted the man as he passed on. The man always spoke to Pollyanna after this, though usually he said little but "good afternoon." Even that, however, was a surprise to Nancy, who was with Pollyanna one day when the man greeted her. "Sakes alive, Miss Pollyanna," she gasped. "Did that man speak to you?" "Why, yes, he always does." "Now," smiled Pollyanna. "Goodness, did you know who he is?" demanded Nancy. Pollyanna shook her head. "He forgot to tell me." Nancy's eyes widened. "But he never speaks to anybody. He hasn't for years. He's John Pendleton, and he lives alone in a great big lovely house all full of grand things, they say. Some say he's crazy, and some says he's got a skeleton in his closet." "Oh, Nancy," shuddered Pollyanna. "How can he keep such dreadful thing? I think he'd throw it away." Nancy chuckled. She knew Pollyanna thought she meant a real skeleton, but she didn't correct her. "And everyone says he's mysterious," and she went on. "Some years he just travels week in and week out. When he comes back, he writes strange books about the things he's found in those countries. He's got loads of money from his father, but he never spends it around here. He's a funny man, and he's different, too, just like Miss Snow. Only he's a different," said Pollyanna. "Well, I guess he is, rather," chuckled Nancy. "I'm gladder than ever now that he speaks to me," sighed Pollyanna contentedly. Chapter 10. a surprise for Miss Snow. The next time Pollyanna went to see Miss Snow, she found her in a darkened room.
"Oh, is that you, is it?"
asked a voice from the bed.
"I remember you. I wish you had come yesterday. I wanted you yesterday."
"Did you? Well, I'm glad it isn't any further away from yesterday than today," laughed Pollyanna. She sat her basket down on a chair. "Why, but aren't you dark here, though?" "I can't see you a bit," she cried, crossing to the window and pulling up the shades. "I want to see if you fixed your hair like I did." "Oh, you haven't. But never mind. Maybe you'll let me do it later. But now I want you to see what I've brought you." The woman moved restlessly.
"Well, what is it?"
"Guess. What do you want?" said Pollyanna. The woman hesitated. She had gotten so used to wanting what she did not have that it was impossible to say what she did want.
"Well, of course there's lamb broth."
"I've got it," crowed Pollyanna.
"But that's what I didn't want," sighed the sick woman. "It was chicken I wanted."
"Oh, I've got that too," chuckled Pollyanna.
"Both of them?"
the woman demanded. "Yes, and cassfoot jelly," said Pollyanna. "I thought you should have what you wanted for once, so Nancy and I fixed it. There's only a little of each, but there's some of all of them." There was no reply. The sick woman seemed to be trying, mentally, to find something she had lost. "There," announced Pollyanna, as she lifted 3 bowls from her basket and arranged them in a row on the table. "How do you do today?" she asked.
"Very poorly,"
murmured Miss Snow.
"Nellie Higgins next door has begun music lessons, and her practices are driving me nearly wild. She was at it all morning."
And Pollyanna nodded sympathetically. "I know. It is awful. Miss White had it once. One of my ladies' aiders, you know. She had rheumatic fever at the same time, and she couldn't thrash around. Move, you know, when the music gets too hard to stand. She told me she'd have gone crazy if it hadn't been for Miss White's sister's ears."
"Sisters? Ears? What do you mean?"
Pollyanna laughed. "Well, you see, Miss White's sister was awfully deaf, and she came to visit 'em. Well, they had such an awful time making her understand anything that every time the piano started to play across the street, Miss White felt as glad as she could hear it, that she didn't mind so much that she did hear it. You see, she was playing the game too."
"The game?"
Pollyanna clapped her hands. "I almost forgot. But I thought of what you wanted me to see if you could be glad about."
"Glad about? What do you mean?"
"Why, don't you remember? You asked me to tell you something to be glad about, even though you have to lie here in bed all day."
"Oh," scoffed the woman. "That. I remember that. But I didn't suppose you meant it."
"Oh, but I did," nodded Pollyanna, "and I found it too. But it was hard. It's more fun, though, when it's hard. And I admit that I couldn't think of anything for a while, but then I got it." "Did you?
"Really? Well, what is it?"
Miss Snow's voice was sarcastically polite. Pollyanna drew a long breath. "I thought how glad you could be that other folks weren't like you, all sick in bed, you know," she announced. Miss Snow stared. Her eyes were angry. "Well, really," she said in a disagreeable voice. "And now I'll tell you the game," proposed Pollyanna. "It'll be just lovely for you to play, and there's so much more when it is hard. You see, it's like this." And she began to tell of the missionary barrel and the crutches and the dolls that did not come. The story was just finished when Millie appeared at the door. "Your aunt wants you, Miss Pollyanna," she said. "She telephoned down to the Harlows across the way, and she said you've got some practicing to make up before dark." Pollyanna rose reluctantly. "All right," she sighed. "I'll hurry." And suddenly she laughed. "I suppose I ought to be glad I've got legs to hurry with, hadn't I, Miss Snow?" There was no answer. Miss Snow's eyes were closed, but Millie, whose eyes were wide open with surprise, saw that there were tears on Miss Snow's cheeks. "Goodbye," called Pollyanna over her shoulder. "I'm awfully sorry about the hair. Maybe I can do it next time." One afternoon, Pollyanna came coming down from her attic room, met her aunt in the stairway. "Why, Aunt Polly, how perfectly lovely!" she cried. "You were coming up to see me. Come right in," she finished, scampering up the stairs and throwing her door wide open. Miss Polly had been planning to look for a white wool shawl in the cedar chest, but to her surprise she found herself instead in Pollyanna's little room, sitting in one of the straight-back chairs. So many times since Pollyanna came, Miss Polly had found herself like this, doing some unexpected, surprising thing, quite unlike the thing that she had set out to do. "I love company," said Miss Pollyanna, "especially since I'd had this room, you know. Oh, I had a room always, but it was a rented room, and rented rooms aren't half as nice as owned ones, are they? I do own this one, don't I?" "Why, yes, Pollyanna," murmured Miss Polly, wondering why she did not get up at once and go look for that shawl. "And of course, now I just love this room, even if it hasn't got the carpets and curtains and pictures that I'd always been wanting." With a blush, Pollyanna stopped short. "What's that, Pollyanna?" "Nothing, Aunt Polly. I didn't mean to say it." "Probably not," returned Miss Polly coldly. "But you did. So I suppose we have the rest of it." "It was only that I'd been kind of planning on pretty carpets and lace curtains and things, you know." "Planning on them?" interrupted Miss Polly sharply. Pollyanna blushed more. "I shouldn't have, of course," she apologized. "It was only because I'd always wanted them and hadn't had them. Oh, we'd had 2 rugs in the barrels, but they were little, and one had ink spots and the other holes. And there were those 2 pictures, the good one we sold and the bad one that broke. And of course it hadn't been for all that, I shouldn't have wanted pretty things. And I shouldn't have got to planning all through the hall that first day how pretty mine would be here. But truly, Aunt Polly, it was just a few minutes before I was glad that the bureau didn't have a looking glass, because it didn't show my freckles. And there couldn't be a nicer picture than the one out my window. You've been so good to me that—" Miss Polly rose suddenly to her feet. Her face was very red. "That will do, Pollyanna," she said stiffly. "You have said quite enough." The next minute she had swept down the stairs. Not until she reached the first floor did it occur to her that she had gone up into the attic to find a white wool shawl. Less than 24 hours later, Miss Polly said to Nancy, "You may move Miss Pollyanna's things downstairs this morning to the room directly beneath. I have decided to have my niece sleep there for now." "Yes, ma'am," said Nancy aloud. To Pollyanna, a minute later, she cried joyously, "Listen to this, Miss Pollyanna. You're going to sleep downstairs in the room straight under this one." Pollyanna grew white. "Really and truly?" Nancy nodded her head to Pollyanna over the armful of dresses she had taken from the closet. "I'm to take your things, and I'm going to take 'em too before she changes her mind." Pollyanna did not stop to hear the end of the sentence. She was flying downstairs, 2 steps at a time. Bang went 2 doors and a chair before Pollyanna at last reached her goal, Aunt Polly.
Oh, Aunt Polly, did you mean it? Really? Why, that room's got everything. The carpet and the curtain and 3 pictures.
Very well, Pollyanna. I am pleased that you like the change. But if you think so much of all these things, I trust you will take proper care of them. Pollyanna, please pick up that chair. And you have banged 2 doors in the last half minute. Miss Polly spoke sternly. For some reason, she felt like crying, and Miss Polly was not used to that feeling. Pollyanna picked up the chair. Yes'm, I know I banged those doors, she admitted cheerfully. You see, I just found out about the room, and I reckon you'd have banged doors if... Pollyanna stopped short. Aunt Polly, did you ever bang doors? I hope not. Miss Polly was shocked. Why, Aunt Polly, what a shame. Pollyanna's face expressed sympathy. A shame? Repeated Aunt Polly, too dazed to say more. Why, yes. You see, if you'd felt like banging doors, you'd have banged 'em, of course. And if you didn't, that must have meant that you weren't ever glad over anything. I'm so sorry you weren't ever glad over anything. Pollyanna, gasped the lady. Pollyanna was gone, and only the distant bang of the attic stairway door answered her. Miss Polly, in the sitting room, felt disturbed. Of course she had been glad over some things.